Salespeople aren't hitting their numbers. Sales turnover, still very high. Who's to blame for this mess? Well, coming up next, we'll talk to an expert. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. So great to have you alongside. And listen, I hope you will like and subscribe to the podcast as we talk about what's wrong with sales training. And frankly, there's plenty to go around. Plenty wrong with sales training, but it's not because of how we do it. There's underlying systemic causes. And I'm excited to welcome in Alex McNaughten. It's the weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. So we're going to call on your sales brain and see if we can't rewire a little bit of what's going on. But I'm really excited. You're from New Zealand, originally from London. I ran into you reading one of your excellent LinkedIn posts, and you're on some of the cutting edge of AI. You're co-founder, co-CEO of Grw AI. Also, you're a part of a newsletter, the R Word newsletter, which R meaning revenue. But you got started in the sales game sort of like I did, not in the same context, but early. I started in sales when I was 20. You started when you were 19, and you've had quite the impact on selling. Give us a brief bio. Give us an understanding of who Alex is.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me on the show. The very quick version is I fell into sales at 19 and ended up actually building out a sales and go-to-market function at a tech startup. And that was my very first role. And I did the kind of crazy 0 to 2 million revenue journey at a tech startup, fell in love with sales over those 2 years, and did 3 more roles. Then I set up a go-to-market and sales consultancy back in 2019. Okay. Then I built a sales training and sales recruitment company in 2021. And then all of the learnings I've had through this career as a seller, leader, and then multiple time founder, I've now co-founded a company called Grw AI, a team management co-pilot to make every sales leader exceptional.
Sure. Well, you had a LinkedIn post that I referred to recently, just jumped all over me because you talked about how quota attainment is still in the tank. We still have a tremendous amount of sales turnover, and you believe that there's a root cause for that. And I'm a root cause systems kind of guy. Tell me kind of what you concluded and what you shared in that LinkedIn post.
Yeah. So I got interested in this, through my career and particularly in the last few years, because I kept seeing these terrible outcomes, across the board. And I started doing some research, and I found that, your average quota attainment is 39%. Your average tenure in sales is 14 months. Your average sales manager or VP of sales stays for 17 or 18 months. And 1 in 4 new sales hires fail. And I was like, God, that seems terrible. Has that been going on forever? And it sort of has. It's actually been getting worse. And then after kind of really studying this, and I've worked across about 140, 150 companies through my previous businesses, the realization we had is that sales management and coaching gaps are the consistent barriers to sales performance. And, when you dig a bit deeper, you see that 95% of sales managers get no sales management training. So that seems like a big area, a big gap. And then you look at the sellers in the teams, and 70% of them don't get regular sales coaching. So
right.
Big gap.
It's a huge gap. And the thing that concerns me is it's not like this is unknown information. Like you said, this hasn't changed. 2 decades or more, it's been consistently like this, and we continually make the same mistake over and over. I mean, it's so common, Alex, that everybody knows it and laughs about it. We take our best salesperson. By the way, this was me 100 years ago, top salesperson in the country, back-to-back years, sales management position comes open. Who's the guy? They're like, you want to be a sales manager? Well, of course, because of ego and every other thing in the world. And yet the preparation that I got was zero. They didn't tell me anything about how to be a leader. And those consequences are very well known, especially by HR. We lose a great salesperson. We get a terrible sales manager. What would you do differently? I mean, what would you tell are we supposed to actually promote average salespeople? I mean, what's the answer?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, right? Because exactly what you've described, that was my experience. That was my very first sales job, was first sales hire, and then suddenly I'm the sales leader and I've got a team of 12 and I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do with these people? I'm 20 at this point, like I don't know how to manage them. And that's the common experience. What do you do? I think, like you said, the default of just promoting the best seller into sales management role is not the answer, because just because you're really good at selling doesn't mean you're very good at leading people. Very different skill sets. Also, being a sales manager, frontline sales manager, there's a lot of like administration and reporting and so on that you probably don't have to do as a seller. So again, it's a totally different skill set. So I think, short term is what you do is you look at, okay, how can we level up our sales managers and actually give them the tooling, the skills, the capability to be effective in their role. I think that's a start. I think then also is looking at who are we hiring for sales management roles and actually being a little bit more discerning in terms of the people we put in those roles and not just default to the best seller. And then I think the third point I'd maybe overlay on top of this is, if you're in sales, don't automatically think that your next career move should be a management role. Okay. Right. I know lots of salespeople who went to management and then realized they're earning less and went back to sales. And now Absolutely. They take home $500,000 to $1 million a year as an individual contributor. So, the default of you have to go to leadership as the next step. You don't. You actually could just move into a more senior sales role or move into a different organization, down the line, sell something different if you're worried about career earnings over time.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, because a lot of people go into that position thinking, well, this is an enhancement to my career. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to advance. And then the cold news hits them like, a gale force wind. And they say, no, I'm not built for this and I don't want this. But I don't think I hear you saying, nor what I say, but I don't think I hear you saying great salespeople can't be sales leaders. No. It's just, as you mentioned, a completely different skill set. What is the difference? What are the critical areas, Alex, that you have to level up if you're going to be an effective sales leader?
I think, and it's kind of like my attitude to this is very similar to sales, is anyone can be taught how to be really good at selling, and anyone can be taught how to be really good at leadership. But the question is, do you want to?
Yes.
Because, so when you're taking on a leadership role, suddenly you've gone from, all I have to worry about is myself and my performance to now I've got a team of 10 and these people rely on me for their livelihood. And it's a different frame, and not everyone wants to make that jump and have that responsibility. So, I think that's the first kind of distinction I point out, is like anyone can be taught to be good at things, but the question is, do you want to do it or not? I think in terms of specifically like what is involved in good sales management, I think there are a fair few crossovers. It's like good processes, good cadences, being curious. I think coaching is one of the hardest parts of being a sales manager that most sales managers get no help with. And they really struggle in that area. And unfortunately, what happens is they default back into what they're good at, which is selling. So the classic of the sales manager just jumping in on the deal rather than coaching. I know that's a bit of a stereotype, but it happens all the time. And I don't blame the sales manager. No one's taught them how to coach. So I think coaching's a really, really big part of sales, of good sales management, sales leadership, and one of the hardest bits to get right.
Yeah, I think there's this sort of default thought process that, hey, if you know how to sell, clearly you know how to teach other people how to sell, which is kind of crazy. I've told people many times about, I have an uncle who's a world-class musician. He's an incredible guitar player, and he is off the charts. But when he tried to teach me guitar, it was the most frustrating thing in the world. He just, he would jump all over the place and he didn't have the patience to deal with somebody as dense as I obviously am when it comes to guitar. I think when I see sales leaders fail, Alex, or that they become resigned to the fact this is not what they want to do, it's typically revolves around patience, either the lack of patience to coach or the lack of patience to deal with all the stinking paperwork and, like you said, the administrative works that I have to do. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I think that's part of. I think another part of it that I haven't mentioned yet is the hiring side of it too, which is it's tough. So 1 in 4 new sales hires fail right now. And again, it's like we lump a lot of jobs on the poor sales manager, hiring being another one of them. And then the problem is talent teams, and I know this from having built and run a sales-focused recruitment company, is that talent teams are not optimized, broadly speaking, for hiring sales talent. It's quite a particular tricky hire to get right. And, again, we expect sales managers, because they were good at selling, to know exactly how to hire another 10 ace salespeople. And again, it's like, that's a whole skill set in and of itself. And for context, right? Like my recruitment company, all we did, or the company's still going, but all we do is hire salespeople. So our new hire failure rate's like less than 3%, but that's because that's all we think about, right? So to expect a sales manager to kind of get anywhere near that without, again, arming them with, here's how you hire salespeople. Here's what you should look for. Here's the questions you should be asking. Here's the, the tests you should be using. Here's the role plays you should be doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot. And then they've got to do all the other things. And sometimes they're even holding a quota too, which is craziness, right? So sometimes sales managers are holding an individual quota too. So then it's like, well, of course we're setting them up for failure.
Absolutely, because if I have a quota and I'm getting paid to have that quota, I can promise you that's where my primary focus is, instead of developing a team, because I'm probably getting a small override or commission of that, but it doesn't approach what I'm getting on the other side. Alex McNaughten is our guest, and you want to find him at Grw AI, also the co-author of the R Word, the revenue newsletter. But Alex, I mean, you said a mouthful there. A whole lot of different things are going on, but the hiring side of it, I think the worst part of it, when I first became a sales manager, again, zero training whatsoever. I was looking for people like me, which is like the worst way to hire, because the minute I feel like, oh, you're like me, all my biases kick in and I'm going to hire you regardless of all the red flags that I get. And many times, absolutely the best selling that a salesperson ever does is in an interview. Sometimes they can sell, but they won't when they get into the hard parts of selling. And this is just a very difficult piece for new sales managers to pick up. If you were training somebody today, how would you start them down the path? There's some critical skills they need, hiring, coaching, et cetera. How would you begin the preparation part of that?
Look, if I think about, an organization, and I think about, okay, how do we enable sales managers in this organization to be successful? I think you need a process for everything. I think process helps so that it's repeatable. So that's where I'd start with a new person. Is all right, let's chunk this role down into the various aspects we've got, right? Which is, okay, you've got kind of core management cadences, we've got coaching, we've got hiring, we've got the reporting and administration side of it, we've got managing up and managing down. So let's chunk it down and let's kind of create some processes and cadences around these different things to make life a little bit easier. That would be sort of the teach part. And then the next part about it is ongoing coaching. As much as your sellers need ongoing coaching, so should your sales managers.
Yes. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my career was I was responsible for sales training for an organization. And so I led the educational side of training them. It was like a 2-week training class broken into pieces and those kind of things. And I'll never forget, we always awarded a most valuable player. And we had a most valuable presentation. Who did the best final presentation, right? And the idea was to get everybody on the same page in terms of being able to present products. So the background is you're just learning the product. This is not the sales process and all that. But at the same time, who was the person who contributed to the most to the class itself and the other individuals? So as a young guy, I really was confused about what those things look like. And I remember having a conversation about a particular class. And I said, all right, who's the MVP of the class? 3 or 4 people helping me, as co-instructors and those kind of things. This is clearly the guy. John is the guy. John is the most valuable player. And I'm like, John's presentations are, they're okay, but they're not great. He doesn't always have really great answers in class. This guy over here, which by the way was a guy I hired, I mean, he's stellar. I mean, his presentations are unbelievable. I mean, he's on top of things. His knowledge is great and everything. And they all looked at me and said, "You're making a mistake. Okay, this is the most valuable player." Well, I didn't listen. I chose the wrong guy. I regret it to this day. And the guy that they picked wound up being a superstar, and the guy I picked washed out in 6 months. It just goes to show you that the biases that are involved in the management leadership process, especially with coaching, are real, aren't they? I mean, they really get you.
They are. And I think, so the reason we started Grw AI is because we saw this and we realized that like frontline managers, middle managers are sort of not really from a fault of their own, but causing some of the challenges that we see in sales right now. And we wanted to arm them with something that would actually help them to achieve their, to fulfill their role and support their team in the right way. Because it really is an impossible job when you think about it. Like, it's a really, it's one of the hardest jobs. I really stand by this. It's one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have in sales, is trying to manage, be a kind of a middle manager, frontline manager, because you've got too many people. You've got up to, I've seen frontline managers with 16 direct reports.
That's crazy.
How can you do that? Like even if we just look at the one-on-one, like how can you have 16 one-on-ones every 2 weeks and you've got to prepare for them? Like, it's too much. So that's why we built Grw AI, is to actually help sales managers do their job and also make sure their teams were getting some support and coaching using the power of AI. I think unless we start arming frontline sales managers with tooling, with investment in their capability, and then also looking at, being a bit more discerning around who we put in those roles as well, nothing's going to change. So I'm really, really a believer in, like, we need to support frontline managers way more than they are today.
Absolutely. Great stuff. He's Alex McNaughten. Listen, coming up next, we're going to talk about coaching salespeople. We've mentioned it several times. 70% of all salespeople don't get any coaching. We're going to come back. We're going to give you some tips. Stay with us. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. Every leader wants their sales team to be better. Nobody really has a good grasp of how to get that done. Well, very few. This change is extraordinarily difficult. I know, because I do it every day. Working with sales organizations, trying to change them systemically. We don't do change. We don't like change. We'd like to get, a 4-hour training magic bullet that magically makes us a better sales team and magically changes our results. That's adorable, but it's just not working. Welcome back to Sales Untraining. Great to have you alongside. And listen, I hope you will like and subscribe to the podcast. Share it with people that you know as we talk about the things that I believe are wrong with sales training. And no matter how good you do it, if we don't solve some of these systemic issues, it creates some very real problems inside the sales force. Talking about some of those today with Alex McNaughten. We've been talking about the transition, Alex, from sales to sales leadership. And one of the critical skills that we don't train on and we don't see happening with the frequency that it needs to happen, obviously, is sales coaching. But let's start with something easy. Exactly what are you talking about? When you say sales coaching, what do you mean?
So, yeah, I think it's a really good place to start, because I think a lot of people muddle up training and coaching. So a lot of people think it's the same thing and use them interchangeably. So training to me is like teaching a new skill. So, I'm running a session on discovery, and I'm gonna teach someone a new approach. Coaching is the ongoing reinforcement and actually helping people to think through things for themselves, to embed learning. I think that's how I would look at coaching. Coaching can also be on the job. So it can be, for example, deal coaching. So helping someone work through a specific deal that they're working on. I think what coaching isn't is telling people what to do. What coaching isn't is just jumping in and doing it for them. And I think that's unfortunately sometimes what happens, or what gets mistaken for coaching.
Oh, absolutely. Having a conversation recently with a sales leader, and we were talking about sales coaching. I said, so do you coach your salespeople consistently? Absolutely. I say, very good. Well, tell me what that sounds like. Well, he said, let me give you an example. I had one of my reps in today, and he wasn't doing something right. And I said, look, what you need to do is X, and you need to change this, and you need to do this. And I said, and that's what you think is coaching. And he said, well, yeah. I mean, I'm telling him what he needs to fix. I'm telling him what he needs to change. I said, yeah, but here's the problem. Are you doing it live? Are you doing it on the field, as it were? So I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but having played sports in college, you learn a skill. You learn how to, I was a wide receiver in college. So you learn how to run a route and how to get open and how to do all these things. And clearly, if they tell you one time, you know exactly how to do it and you make zero mistakes. Or no, you do it over and over and over while the coach observes you in the actual implementation or execution of a particular skill, telling you in real time what to fix, what to change, what to adjust, how to get better. And you transfer it to muscle memory, right? But you and I are in a one-on-one and I say, Alex, you need to do X. Well, it might be a week before you even have an opportunity to even engage in whatever you were doing. What is your recall of that conversation? And by the way, because it's not ingrained in muscle memory, when you don't do it well, you just default back to what you've always done. And yet we call that coaching. It's such a misnomer in the sales business, I think.
Yeah, well, again, it's a little bit like the sales management challenge, which is 95% of sales managers don't get any sales management training. I don't see anyone getting any coaching training, like how to coach. So,
absolutely.
What is the default for someone who's, been a top seller, who's been promoted to sales management? What's their default? Their default is either to show and just jump in and do it, or just to quickly tell because they're busy and they've got another 9 direct reports also with questions.
Yeah, now, absolutely.
It can seem counterintuitive to slow down and take someone on a learning journey.
Absolutely.
But you have to slow down to go fast, because the problem is if you just tell that person, here's what you should do, chances are that's not going to be the last time you tell them. Because they're not, exactly like you said, they're not going to remember it immediately. You don't change behavior just like that. And you certainly don't change behavior just when you tell someone to do it. So, I like the sports analogy because I think it's more akin to how we should approach developing sales teams, which is continual. An elite sports team, they're training all the time. It's daily almost, right? Like, God, I've never been in an elite sports team, but my sister was a Div 1 tennis athlete, and she was training all the bloody time, like every single day for hours. And in sales, what do? We give someone a training maybe once a quarter, once a year. I've seen the token sales training at the end of the year or the sales kickoff, and it's like, all right, you're ready to go. And it's like, well, actually, no, it's got to be continual. It's far more effective if you do sort of 5 to 10 minutes of coaching every week, or a few minutes a day even. That's going to add up over time significantly in terms of the capability and performance of the team.
Absolutely. I think the important point you made in the first segment that just really strikes me is that when you have too many direct reports, Alex, you don't even have time to dedicate to the kind of real-time, slow motion type of coaching that's really necessary. I mean, a sales manager should be in the field observing calls, working with salespeople. I know role play is a dirty word for a lot of people because it's been misused and abused in so many ways. But if you're not practicing somewhere, you're practicing on clients. I don't see that going very well. What do you think is the ideal sort of ratio between sales leader and the number of sales people that he or she is responsible for?
It's hard, right? I would say a sales leader with sort of just like running quite an analog team, as in they don't have a great tech stack and that, they don't have things helping them out. I'd say it's probably something like 5, maybe 7 tops. I think beyond that, it's getting quite difficult to get around all those people. I think the beauty of technology now, and not trying to plug what we're doing, but that unlocks it effectively means a sales leader can manage a much larger team now because technology can help them supercharge what they're able to do as one individual. So I think that will change over time. I think technology unlocks a sales leader being effective over a larger number of people. But I think what the problem is, we've got most organizations not that technologically advanced in sales. With large teams, which is a recipe for disaster. That's kind of what I've seen over the last 5 years.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it because I actually want to have you on to talk about Grw AI because of exactly what you're doing is trying to enable sales leaders to be much more effective in the one-on-one interaction and to provide some real-time coaching. Give us a little bit of a sense of what that looks like in the real world. How does Grw AI look to a sales leader?
The really short version is it's like an extension of themselves. So it allows them to be in more places at once. But as what we've built is we've built Taylor, who's our AI performance coach. And Taylor runs conversational one-on-ones with every single person in that sales team. And they do that weekly. And through those conversations, Taylor surfaces at both a team and individual level insights for that sales leader so that they can be more impactful. So for example, with one of our customers recently, it surfaced that 2/3 of the team were struggling at a very specific point in the sales process. And that was then the impetus for that sales leader to say, okay, cool. That seems like a team training opportunity because we've got the bulk of the team struggling in that versus actually I've got Johnny over here who needs help just in this one area, and that's a one-on-one opportunity. So in my next one-on-one with Johnny, I'm going to address that with them. The other side of what Grw AI does and what Taylor's doing for these sellers is Taylor's actually providing some coaching and feedback in the one-on-one sessions they're having with Taylor through those conversations. So, again, like we go back to the busy persona of a sales leader who's got, let's say, 10 direct reports. You've got 10 direct reports, that's 10 one-on-ones every 2 weeks, say. That's 30 minutes preparation per one-on-one if you're doing it properly. And then you've got to have the one-on-one, which is 30 minutes as well. What we do is we cut that preparation time down to almost 0 and allow that sales lead to jump into their one-on-one way more informed and actually be impactful in the time that they have together with the seller. And actually just make better decisions, faster decisions, and learn things that they had no idea were going on across the team because they can't be everywhere at once and can't be talking to the team all the time.
Wow. Technology is incredible. And what AI is doing in the sales world is dramatic. And yet it's still not, Alex, it's still not replacing the human sales leader. It's not replacing the interaction between sales leader and salesperson. It's just another great tool to use.
That's it. And like, one of our customers, the CEO of one of our customers actually said this to me. He's like, and I'm going to butcher the quote slightly, but he said something along the lines of, you need people to deal with the kind of random stuff that happens in running a team or being in sales. Like you can't replace all of that. And you can't replace, you can't automate trust and replace all of that. That's what we need people for. But technology can certainly make, whether you're a seller, whether you're a sales leader, or in any profession really, can certainly make us significantly more effective and effectively give us superpowers to be better at our jobs. And I think that's certainly how we're looking at this technology that is very exciting and revolutionary in terms of what we're able to do with it.
Absolutely. So many things to be said for using that technology. But listen, if you're on the show, if you're listening to the show, I can tell you without question, if you want to grow salespeople, it takes an investment in time, an investment in coaching. I mean, coaching sales leadership, Alex, is just, it's inefficient. And most salespeople are not wired to be inefficient. They're wired to give you an answer and move on to the next problem, right? That's exactly what we talked about. And therefore, they have teams that are way too big and they spend far too little time coaching. Well, I'm hoping this will have provided some insights to people into some things that they can do differently, or at least look at areas that need to be addressed. But let's wrap up today's show. Tell us how we can find out more about you and about Grw AI.
So www.grow.ai, grw.ai. You can find me on LinkedIn, Alex McNaughten. Like you said earlier, I've got a newsletter called The R Word, and then I've also got a podcast as well called the Rev Up Sales Podcast.
Good stuff, man. Hey, thanks for joining us, and thanks for being a part of Sales Untraining.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.